50,000 troops, 250 aircraft, 65 warships, and 10,000 tanks and vehicles. That's a pretty straightforward message.
India's largest military exercise since the end of the Cold War. Troops I'm very careful to say that the anniversary in this battle.
The largest NATO exercise in decades. 50,000 soldiers have been deployed in this region, and as these drills go on, Russia is making its own plans. Missile tactics in the same area, both in the same time. NATO feels it needs to follow up this
President Trump threatens to impose more tariffs against all of China's remaining exports to the United States if talks with President Xi fail in November. These new tariffs could amount to $257 billion of Chinese goods. President Trump and Xi are set to meet at the end of November at the G20 summit in Argentina. The President Xi also calling on his military advisors to prepare for fighting a war. Xi making those comments following his visit last week to the disputed islands in the South China Sea.
Here's the thing. The Chinese government almost never says anything you wouldn't expect. That's their thing, their gimmick. They're incredibly careful, reserved, at least with their tongues. So when the Chinese president orders his military to prepare for war, serious indeed.
He urged the military to concentrate on advancing readiness for war.
The Chinese are preparing for war out loud. How, oh how, did we get to this? Well, Trump, for one. Aside from lambasting the Chinese at every opportunity, his tariffs, his sanctions, his trade war, he's also being very heavy-handed. Congress has just approved a second arms deal with Taiwan in 18 months.
The sales of weapons by the United States to Taiwan damages China's sovereignty and security interests.
Beijing sees China and Taiwan as two parts of a whole, two Chinese entities, same culture, ethnicity, same languages, with two separate governments, communist, capitalist. The end goal is to reunite into one state. There are differences, of course, currently preventing that, and about 100 kilometers of sea that separate the two. And Trump, always a fan of sticking it to the Chinese, he's been floating his warships right between the two China.
This is Snoopy for USS Decatur, operating in the South China Sea on 29 September to 30 September 2018. Home position was Home position was 10073 north, 11407 east. We interacted with 1 Luoyang 2 DDG. CPA was 45 yards. They were positioning in to close on our port side. We're trying to push us out of the way.
We have expressed our concerns to the US side. The Taiwan issue concerns China's sovereignty and territorial integrity and is the most important and sensitive issue in China-US relations.
For starters, how about you express your concerns about these important and sensitive issues to someone who cares a little more? Because that ain't Trump.
Are you worried about any negative reactions?
I'm not worried about anything. I don't worry about things.
Hakuna Matata. Must be great never worrying about anything. Unfortunately, others are. There are those in China who believe that America wants Taiwan to declare independence, and the Chinese are preparing for that eventuality, militarily.
We are resolute to defeat any scheme or act of Taiwan independence in any form.
Thing is, the Taiwanese don't really see a point to defending themselves. Taiwan, which recently switched from a conscription to a volunteer army, is having huge trouble recruiting. Even reserve troops are dodging their duty.
Over the last few days and weeks, we've heard some very troubling words come from members representing the great powers, including a former U.S. commander in Europe, Lieutenant General Ben Hodges. He said, the United States needs a very strong European pillar. I think in 15 years, it's not inevitable, but it is a very strong likelihood that we will be at war with China. President Xi of China said, we have to set up a combat readiness exercises, joint exercises, and confrontational exercises to enhance servicemen's capabilities and preparation for war. And we have the deputy director of the Russian Foreign Ministry's Department of Nonproliferation and Arms Control. He says, at a recent meeting, the U.S. stated that Russia is preparing for war. Yes, Russia is preparing for war. I can confirm it. This is not getting a whole lot of coverage, I'm afraid, in the mainstream media. These are very important words. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, Oliver Stone and I, you mentioned the untold history of the United States. We just did an updated edition that covers the period from 2012 to 2018, a new chapter. And if you look at that, the world has become so much more dangerous now than it was in 2012. The situation earlier this year, Secretary of Defense Mattis said that the U.S. strategic threats now, our main threats, come from Russia and China. Before that, it had been global terrorism. In January of this year, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists moved the hands of the doomsday clock to 2 minutes before midnight. They last did that back in 1954 after the US and Soviet Union tested their hydrogen bombs. I think that the bullet and atomic scientists needs to meet again and move their hands closer to midnight. We've got right now, the US is involved in a major NATO exercise, Operation Trident Juncture, which is the biggest operation of this sort in Norway since 1991, the end of the Cold War. Last month, Russia and China participated in Vostok 18, which was the biggest Russian war game since 1981. The world is gearing toward much more closely toward confrontation. We got the situation between the US and China. The US doing freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea. China claiming almost the entirety of the South China Sea with its 9-dash line. That's a confrontation on top of which you've got the trade wars between the US and China, the situation between the US and Russia. You've still got the dangerous confrontation potential in Syria. You've got Ukraine and Crimea. You've got the Baltics. You've got a dangerous situation involving in the Middle East. The situation in Yemen, maybe we're taking a step back from that. Maybe we're taking a step back from confrontation in Korea. But around the world now, we've got a very, very dangerous situation.
Okay.
And I'm quite worried about the possibility of something really developing.
That's why we're doing this program.
Iran has launched a production line for a fourth-generation all-indigenous interceptor jet called Kosar in a major step toward the renovation of its air force. The fighter jet was brought online by Iran's top military base in the central city of Isfahan.
Today we declare proudly that we spend no efforts in obtaining defensive technologies to defend our national security, the values of the Islamic Revolution, and the boundaries of our country. The enemy's psychological warfare, propagandist blackmail and economic sanctions had no effect on the lively trend of advancing the country's deterrent capabilities.
The Kosar fighter jet has been designed to provide logistical support for ground operations.
The fourth-generation Iranian fighter jet is equipped with advanced avionics and fire control systems and can be used in short aerial support missions.
Kosar interceptor jet also boasts advanced maneuvering capability. It enjoys integrated design, a ballistic calculations computer system, head-up display which focuses visual data in front of the pilot's sight, a multi-purpose radar, and an independent radio navigation system.
The inauguration of this jet fighter is a turning point and a new jump in boosting the capability of Air Force of the Army of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Relying on its talented youth, the Islamic Republic of Iran has stood firmly against cruel sanctions imposed on by the US and managed to launch the production line for the Kosar fighter jet.
The jet was unveiled by President Hassan Rouhani on the occasion of Iran's National Defense Industry Day back in August and made its maiden flight in the presence of Iranian officials. Over the past years, Iran has made major breakthroughs in its defense sector and attained self-sufficiency in producing military equipment and hardware despite sanctions and economic pressures on the country. The Islamic Republic says its military power is solely for defensive purposes and does not pose any threat to other nations. Samal Kujuri, Press TV, Isfahan.
Straight to Iran's capital, Tehran, where thousands took to the streets to express their anger over America's reimposing all pre-2015 sanctions. The demonstrations also marked the 39th anniversary of the US embassy takeover in that city. Demonstrators chanted slogans and set fire to American and Israeli flags. The restrictions which the people are decrying came into force hours ago. The sanctions target Iran's oil, banking and shipping sectors and follow Washington's withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear deal, as Murad Gazdiev reports.
These sanctions come into force now, on the 5th of November in the US. 39 years plus a day since the Iranian revolutionaries stormed the US embassy in Tehran in 1979. America really holds grudges.
The rogue regime in Iran spread death, destruction, and chaos The Iranian dictatorship's long campaign remains the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism.
The guy even tweeted a picture of himself styled after the Game of Thrones TV show, with the message that sanctions are coming. A play on winter is coming. Why he did this remains a mystery, since everyone knew that they were coming. He and his government all said this months ago. Iran spent many years under these same sanctions, cut off from the world's banking system, foreign trade, its oil under embargo. And despite that, Iran's oil exports never dropped below 1 million barrels a day, roughly half of what they are now. It can survive. It already has survived these sanctions.
This military exercise is all about defending Iran's skies using domestically developed military hardware and equipment. The Iranian Army's Khatam al-Anbiya air defense base launched the large-scale drills in Iran's central, northern, and western areas to strengthen the country's air defense. Launched jointly with the IRGC's aerospace force, the maneuvers saw the firing of fully indigenous air defense missile systems, including Talash and Mersad, which are capable of intercepting and targeting surveillance planes and drones, flying in low, medium, or high altitudes. The two-day exercise also includes the use of homemade UAVs for reconnaissance and surveillance missions, such as combat drone Karrar and long-endurance unmanned air vehicle Shahed.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has officially announced the reimposition of what he calls the largest ever sanctions on Iran.
Today, we're reimposing all sanctions that were previously lifted under the nuclear deal. This includes sanctions on energy, banking, shipping, and shipbuilding industries. Since the Trump administration came into office, we've done 19 rounds of sanctions, targeting 168 Iranian entities. Today's sanctions will accelerate the rapid decline of international economic activity in Iran since the implementation of our strategy in May.